That was a skull that was stolen, a human skull, but Satanists used it for their black magic rituals.
Ed and Lorraine Warren's names are often associated with haunted houses, poltergeist activity, possessions, exorcisms, and cursed objects. The Warrens did it all, and throughout their adventures, they collected a sizable amount of terrifying items. Possessed dolls, vampire coffins, shrunken heads, cursed paintings, haunted instruments, and the list goes on. So today we're going to delve into some of the darkest, most paranormally active items ever held at the Warrens Occult Museum. What are they? Where did they come from? And what kind of harm could they unleash if you get too close to them? Let's talk about this and more only in today's video. Starting off this countdown, we have the Dinosaur Toy. One of the strangest items in the Warrens collection isn't some ancient chalice from some dark, mysterious corner of the world. It's actually a dinosaur toy. But the dinosaur is said to have not only levitated during a young boy's possession, but had the dark entity speak through it, telling everyone in the room, and I quote, "You're all going to die." Here's a little bit of background into this toy. In Brookfield, Connecticut in 1981, this possession story was used during a court case that was later dubbed the Devil Made Me Do It case. And you may know it from the Conjuring movie, The Devil Made Me Do It. This is the first known US court case where the defense tried to claim demonic possession as a reason for an unaliving. About a year before the trial, Debbie Glatzel and her fiance Arn Johnson were helping Debbie's parents clean up a rental house that they had just gotten. Debbie's 11-year-old brother David started saying he could see an odd man who was threatening to hurt their family if they moved in. At first they thought David was just making this up as an excuse to get out of doing chores, but they later realized that was not the case.
And the call came in and he spoke about a young boy who he had been trying to help, but recognized it as a case of possession.
David started having violent nightmares, waking up covered in scratches and bruises, and saying that the old man had turned into a demonic entity that wanted his soul. Debbie and Arn brought in priests to do blessings on their home, but this demon would not leave. Eventually, Ed and Lorraine Warren were brought in. According to the Warrens, David wasn't just haunted, he was possessed.
David was in the very beginning stages of demonic possession.
Ed Warren later said that there wasn't just one spirit inside of him, but several. They decided they were going to have to carry out an exorcism to force the demonic entity out. It ended up taking several tries to do so.
I seen nights when it would take 4 and 5 men to hold him down. He would be ranting and raving and yelling. There was times when he would attack his mother. Now this boy loved his mother.
During these exorcisms, Arn Johnson actually said, "Leave David, leave him alone, and possess me instead."
And he screamed at these devils, "Take me on, leave my little buddy alone." He got his wish.
He challenged the
demonic.
The Warrens also claimed they saw David levitate, speak in strange voices, and that he predicted that something terrible was going to happen before whatever was inside of him left. Months later, Arn was at a party with Debbie, her cousin, and her sister, along with Debbie's landlord, Alan Bono. Bono got intoxicated, started harassing Debbie's cousin, and Arn told him to back off. A little while later, things got really heated.
Arnie had gone to a pizza parlor with Debbie, his fiance, and his sisters. They met Alan Bono there, a friend of theirs. They went back to the Bono's house, and Arnie disappeared for a few minutes. When he came back, he was somebody entirely different.
And witnesses described Arn growling like an animal before attacking Bono with the blade. He sadly passed away later. Remember, David months earlier said something bad was going to happen, and Arn was like, "Come, possess me instead." So it was thought that he was possessed by these demons, and those are the demons that made him unalive Alan Bono. The Warrens were heavily involved in Johnson's court case. They tried to claim demonic possession in court, but Judge Robert Callahan flat out rejected it, saying, and I quote, "irrelative and unscientific." The jury wasn't allowed to consider it at all. Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to 10 to 20 years, though he served about 5. It's quite the terrifying case, and it's scary that this dinosaur toy was involved in it. Were the demons originally inside of this toy? Who knows, but it did creepy things like levitate and stuff. It is now locked away in the Warrens' possession. Next up, we have the Shadow Doll. Another item housed in the Warrens collection is the Shadow Doll, or the Doll of Shadows.
The shadow doll is one that comes to you in your dreams in a nightmare and actually can cause a heart attack.
The story starts with two doll collectors who were intrigued by this unsettling creation for some reason, and they bought it from a dealer for a shockingly low price. Shockingly. I wonder why. Maybe because it's haunted. The doll collectors had no idea what they were really bringing into their home.
A young couple bought it from an antique store, and they thought it was, just an antique, but then we found out that there were animal parts and bird parts and even some human bones in there.
On the first night, both of them woke up with unexplained scratches on their bodies. They would also start telling each other about particularly vivid, unsettling nightmares, only to find out that the nightmares that they were having were identical. Things only continued to escalate, and with no other options, they reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren for help. Well, the Warrens confirmed that all of this spooky stuff was being caused by that doll that they brought into the home. But this thing wasn't just haunted. It was a conduit for something much, much darker.
It's what we call a diabolical curse that can come to these people in their dreams.
A malevolent force that connects to its victims through their dreams. Because it was causing real physical wounds, Ed and Lorraine Warren took the doll. Ed would always say on tour that this is the doll that was known to stop people's hearts while they were trapped in the nightmares it conjured. Good luck, Matt Rife. Next up, we have the brick. Basically anything could be haunted. That's what we're learning here, including a brick. But this is because it's a brick from the Borley Rectory. And this is one of the most haunted houses in the world. If you ask people back in the early 1900s what the most haunted house in England was, a lot of them would have pointed straight to this place. It was built in 1863 for Reverend Henry Bull, and almost from day one, it has an eerie reputation. People would say that the land itself was cursed. Story goes that a monk and a nun fell in love and tried to run away together. They got caught. The monk was hung, and the nun was bricked up alive in a convent wall. So when the rectory was later built on the same spot, you get the point.
I knew that there was a nun that was buried in the walls of the building. I knew her remains had been found, that it was buried at a graveyard very close.
Over the years, there was several stories about how haunted this place was. People would hear footsteps in the empty halls, faces staring out from the windows, bells ringing by themselves, and ghostly figures wandering the grounds. In 1929, the Daily Mirror sent a paranormal investigator named Harry Price to check the place out. He showed up with cameras, fingerprint kits, and all sorts of gadgets to track the temperature and movement. Well, Harry Price said he saw some stuff. He saw objects not just moving on their own, but flying across the room. He also claimed to hear eerie whispering voices. At this point, the place was pretty notorious for its ghostly activity. And then Reverend Lionel Foster and his wife Marianne moved in, and it did not go well for them. Marianne would say something invisible would slap, push, and scratch her. Strange messages would appear on the walls, sentences that seemed to be written just for her, and they'd only show up when she was around. Thankfully, the couple was smart enough to move out before things got worse. But Harry Price was really invested in this place. He later held seances at the property and claimed that one spirit revealed the names of the monk and the nun from that legend. During another session, a spirit supposedly predicted that the rectory would burn down and that nuns' bones would be found in the ruins. And that's exactly what happened. In 1939, the rectory caught fire. When the rubble was cleared, the remains of a young woman were found in the cellar. After that, the strange activity reportedly stopped. Next up, we have the Pearls of Death. Now, I've talked about this before, and it is very creepy. Jewelry, yes, is known to be possessed. But imagine being gifted a lovely necklace by someone that wanted to you. That's what happened here. The Pearls of Death may look like an ordinary pearl necklace, but according to the Warrens, the moment a woman tried it on, she'd suddenly clutch at her throat as the pearls slowly tightened around it. Her face went pale and she could hardly breathe, and people nearby had to literally tear the pearls off her neck before she blacked out. The Warrens believed that the necklace had been cursed intentionally through dark ritual work. Their son-in-law, Tony Spira, once explained that anything can be used as a vessel for that kind of energy. The same way that a priest can bless a cross, someone can reverse that and pour negative power onto an object. The necklace was locked away in the museum afterwards, and from what Spira said, even just touching the pearls gives people an awful sense of dread. Next, I want to talk about the haunted piano. Ed Warren used to talk about hearing this piano play late at night. Faint notes drifting through the house like someone was quietly testing the keys. But every single time that he'd go to check, the sound would stop cold.
Hannah Crana, the witch, and another witch by the name of Goody Bassett were very involved in black magic at that time. In fact, Goody Bassett was hung. But this organ was in that house for many years. A gentleman had purchased it. He collected organs, but when it started playing on its own, he wanted to get rid of it.
And then there would be this deadness in the air, the kind of thick, eerie silence that almost feels louder than what you just heard. The Warrens said the piano came from the home of a priest who'd passed away. They figured whatever spirit was in the house must have followed the piano when it moved. Unfortunately, they'd never know when the thing was going to go off. There was no specific time of night or day. It would just start playing whenever it wanted.
And we've heard this organ play 3 times, the strains of it coming up through the passageway, into our Halloween room, up the stairs, and into our bedroom.
Ed eventually brought in another priest to bless the museum, and for a while it worked. The piano went quiet. But not long after, every few months, it would start playing by itself again. Now, this is probably one of the creepiest ones I'm going to talk about, and that is the music box. One of the Warrens' most infamous cases was the Perron family haunting, which of course was the inspiration for the first Conjuring movie. And if you're familiar with the movie, then you're really familiar with the music box, which the Warrens ended up bringing to their museum. The Perron family, consisting of Carolyn and Roger and their 5 daughters, moved into a massive farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island in January of 1971. Almost as soon as they settled in, weird things started happening. Carolyn would find her broom moved or just missing altogether. She'd hear scraping sounds in the kitchen, and small piles of dirt would appear in the middle of a freshly cleaned floor. It was odd, but it's nothing dangerous, right? Well, it got dangerous pretty quickly. The girls started seeing figures around the house. Some seemed harmless, others had a certain dark energy about them. When Carolyn started digging into the history of the home, she found it had been in the same family for 8 generations. And a good number of the family had passed away in and around the house under some pretty disturbing circumstances. Some children drowned in a nearby creek, one person was killed, and several folks had hung themselves in the attic. One name that gets brought up a lot in this case is Bathsheba Sherman. She lived there in the 1800s and was accused of witchcraft after a baby in her care suspiciously passed away. The parents believed she was one of the spirits tormenting them. Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter, said that Bathsheba saw herself as the mistress of the house and hated her mother for taking the place.
She said, "I'm scared." And I said, "What are you scared about, honey?" And she said, "I hear voices in my room. I hear voices, and they're all talking to me at one time, and they're all saying the same thing."
And what were they saying?
"There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the
chills.
wall."
Over time, the hauntings got worse. The house would often have this awful smell, almost like rotting flesh. Roger would describe having a deeply unsettling feeling whenever he had to go down to the basement. And the most unexplainable, terrible thing of all, the girls would wake up screaming as their beds rose off the floor. The Warrens were called to investigate and eventually held a seance. And if you've seen the movie, you know how that went down. Carolyn became possessed. She was speaking in another voice and language that she never even knew prior. Then she levitated in her chair before being thrown across the room. Roger kicked the Warrens out and told them never to come back. The family couldn't afford to move either, so they stayed in that house for almost 10 years. Finally, in the 1980s, they left the house and the activity stopped. One of the creepiest details they mentioned later was how certain objects seemed to draw the activity in, like this old music box that would play on its own. According to the Warrens, the box was one of the so-called trigger objects that helped the spirits manifest. The Warrens brought a bunch of objects from the investigation back to the museum, including this music box. And according to them, it still would occasionally play by itself. And then we have the Satanic Idol. This is probably one of the most notorious pieces in the Warrens collection, aside from Annabelle the doll, who I've talked about so much, so I didn't want to include her in this video, but I will link a playlist up above of me talking about her and of some of the other haunted items in the home. I just didn't want to be like so repetitive. Apparently, this Satanic Idol is more evil than Satan himself. Story goes that back in 1991, a hunter was wandering the woods in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, when he came across this strange statue sitting in the middle of a circular clearing. The thing was huge, about 6 feet tall. The longer he looked at it, the more uncomfortable he felt.
That was found in the Sandy Hook area over by Newtown. A hunter had found it, a young hunter, and it belonged to a group of Satanists, powerful group in this area. And this young man was almost killed 3 times for revealing where this idol was. It was in a grotto of rocks where a number of sacrifices of animals had occurred. Could have even been human sacrifices sometimes.
As he walked away, he realized there was an old man in black robes skulking through the trees not too far from him. The man didn't say a word or even look in the hunter's direction. He was just quietly walking alongside him. At one point, the hunter asked how to get out of the woods. The man just pointed, and then he turned and walked away. Shaken, the hunter reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. He led them to the exact spot, and sure enough, the idol was still there. The Warrens took it back to their museum for safekeeping, but right after that, Lorraine suddenly collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. She was unresponsive for 3 days, and doctors couldn't explain what caused it. Ed believed it was a warning, some kind of retaliation from that same robed man, who he thought might have been a satanic high priest guarding the idol.
But we brought it back here to the museum. We had notified the police of it. Lorraine, one day soon after we got it, was thrown 25 feet through the air. She was in a catatonic state for 3 days. So this group was extremely powerful.
To this day, this thing is still in his collection. And again, good luck, Matt Rife, because that's now your responsibility. All right, folks, those are all the creepy cursed items we'll be talking about in today's video. If you want a part 2, then let me know in the comments below where I talk about more of the creepy stuff found in their museum. If you like this video, you know the drill, smash that like button, leave me a little comment. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll see you when I see ya. Bye! Ed and Lorraine Warren's names are often synonymous. Can't say that word. Associated. Debbie's 11-year-old brother, David, stayed... and he would say that the old man had turned into a demonic entity. Debbie and that he predicted something terribly, well, before whatever was inside. And witnesses described Arn howling, when police arrested him, and then going completely It is quite the interesting case, and it's scary that the Dinosaur Toy was president. Wow. Over the years, stories have come out about all the... And then Reverend Lionel Foster and his... Lionel, yeah. And that a nun's... which the Warrens ended up bringing to the... which the Warrens ended up bringing to their museum. And small pile of... one name that gets brought... and the most inexplainable. And if you've seen the movie, you knew how... As he walked, he realized that there was an old man in black robes. If you want to...